Jim, whenever you're ready. How's everybody doing?
Good. How you doing?
Just so you all know, I have our Spartan of the Month in chambers tonight, so
Fantastic. Good.
be going off of the Zoom camera, and it'll be on the cable camera.
Okay, good. Good.
Okay, we are live broadcasting on YouTube as well as recording.
Okay. County City Council for September 28th is now in session. Roll call, please. You're muted, Pam.
Okay, that's better. Okay. Mr. Arcaro,
Present.
Mr. Emery,
Here.
Mr. Goff,
Here.
Mr. Kozeski,
Here.
Mrs. Ledford,
Here.
Mrs. McBoy,
Here.
Mr. Moiseo,
Here.
City Manager, Mr. Hockaday,
Present.
Finance Director, Mr. Williams,
Here.
Law Director, Mr. Smith.
Here.
Okay, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag.
Flag.
The United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Move on to approving the meeting minutes of September 14th, 2020. Are there any alterations or corrections? Okay, hearing none, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion.
I second.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Kozeski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mrs. McBoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo.
Yes.
Okay, the meeting minutes for September 14th, 2020 have been approved. We have two awards presentations tonight, and the first will be an Employee of the Month, which is Jamie Brennan from the Water Office. So, Ms. Nakano, if you could read the certificate into the record.
Certificate of Achievement Employee of the Month. The employee for the month of September is Jamie Brennan. Jamie began her employment with the City of Conneaut as a part-time employee in February 2013. Jamie was hired as a full-time employee on August 15, 2005. During her 17-year career with the city, Jamie worked briefly in the city manager's office and then transferred to the water department billing office. She has become proficient in all aspects of the billing office and has been responsible for training new employees. Over the years, Jamie has worked well with all of her coworkers and has provided outstanding customer service to the citizens of Conneaut. Jamie's high level of professionalism and dedication to the city make her well deserving of the Employee of the Month award. Signed, John Arcaro, Council President and Council Member Terry Moiseo.
Okay, thank you. I've known Jamie for many years, and she is very deserving of this award. So congratulations to her.
Congratulations, Jamie. Well deserved.
Our next presentation this evening for the Spartan of the Month Award And we have Joshua Alexander here with us in council chambers. So we're going to try to play it by ear because it's the time we've had any people here in a while. So if Ms. O'Connell, if you could read the certificate into the record.
Certificate of Achievement, Spartan of the Month. The Spartan for the month of September. The Spartan of the month for September is Joshua Alexander. Joshua is a 12th grade student at Conneaut High School. His nominating teacher, Mrs. Georgia Woods, wrote, Joshua Alexander exhibits a positive attitude towards his classwork, peers, teachers, and is a pleasure to have in the classroom. Joshua puts great effort into his assignments and works hard to ensure that his work is complete with extra detail. He is a leader in the right direction, and I enjoy having him in my classroom. Joshua exhibits those qualities that make him a representative of what it means to be a true Spartan. Signed, Council President John Arcaro and Council Member Jerry Moisio.
Very good. Congratulations, Joshua. Come up here. Your family can come up too. Have a certificate for you. Okay, if you could introduce your family and then we can
My dad, my mom, Sal, and Sept.
Not a problem. Okay, congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Joshua.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Joshua.
Congratulations.
Okay, that concludes our awards presentations for this evening. We have one special presentation, which is a proclamation for the newly opened Truck World. Ms. O'Connell, if you could read the proclamation into the record.
From the Office of City Council, proclamation, whereas Truck World Conneaut is celebrating its grand opening on September 24th, 2020. Whereas Truck World was founded in 1971 and has become a leading gasoline, diesel fuel, and heating oil wholesaler and retailer based in Ohio. Whereas Truck World first announced its intent to open a facility in Conneaut in 2017. In August 2019, Truck World broke ground to begin construction of their Conneaut location. Whereas on August 8th, 2020, Truck World Conneaut opened their doors to truck drivers, travelers, and tourists from across the country. Whereas Truck World invested $13 million in our city, including $1.5 million in public improvements, and created dozens of new job opportunities and additional tax revenues for the city, creating an estimated $1 million payroll in the next 5 years. Whereas Truck World Conneaut consists of passenger car and truck fuel bays, a convenience store, Mavericks Bistro, and Burger King, providing a wide variety of choices for consumers. Now, therefore, the City of Conneaut, Ohio does hereby extend its appreciation to Truck World for partnering with the city and school district to invest in the community and greatly improving opportunities for economic development along the Route 7 corridor. The City of Conneaut wishes Truck World the very best for success, growth, and prosperity in the future. Signed the 24th day of September, John Arcaro, Council President.
So as you know, they did have the ribbon cutting on the 24th this past Thursday. It was a very nice event, well attended. Mrs. Ledford and Mrs. McCoy were able to join me out there, and it was rather warm, but it was nice. And we definitely welcome them to the city and appreciate their investment here in the city. Mr. Hockaday, would you like to add anything?
I'd just like to thank Gary Burke, the owner of Truck World. I don't know how to explain to folks the amount of work that went into receiving an LA break, a limited access highway curb cut to put in the signal to make it a safer intersection. That was literally years of work and effort. And I'm very appreciative to be able to work with a professional like Gary and really his entire family. I've had the opportunity to meet all 4 of his children who all work for Truck World, and they are based here in Ohio. So really nice to have an investment, even though they're not from Conneaut, they're from right around Hubbard, and they are a great family, and I'm so happy they chose Conneaut, and it'll be fun seeing the future with them, because this is really just phase 1 of some of their effort out of that corridor. So congratulations to them, big step.
Okay, anybody else have any comments on Truck World?
I'm very happy to see Truck World come in, working as far with the Planning Commission, working with Truck World was they were very good. They helped out a lot, and I hope everybody that comes out there is more in tune with our local economy and how things work here. They did a great job, I think. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, we'll move on to citizen comments. Does anybody have any citizen comments? Okay, if not, move on to communications.
I have none this evening.
Okay, does council have any communications? Okay, move on to reports of our administration and begin with City Manager, Mr. Hockaday.
Thank you, Council President Arcaro. I have included in your packet the Halloween guidelines. So let me talk a little bit about how this was approached. This was a conversation that took place on kind of the county-wide COVID calls over the last couple of weeks. What has happened at the request of all the municipalities in the county was all 3 health departments within Ashtabula County, which is Ashtabula County Health Department, Ashtabula City Health Department, and the City of Conneaut Health Department, took the state rules that were issued by ODH and further refined them and made a recommendation to all the communities within the county as far as how we should approach Halloween. And this was kind of at our request, and kind of my obligation was, okay, if you provide this, we will most likely follow any guidance that you issue. So first and foremost amongst that guidance is everybody set the same date and time. So the date and time, thankfully, Halloween is on a Saturday. The 31st is on a Saturday this year. And they've recommended the times 4 to 6. The reason why they want everybody to adopt the same date and time is to prevent people going from one community in Ashtabula County to going to a neighboring community in Ashtabula County. Fairly common sense. So I am happy to say October 31st, 4 to 6. And then they make a series of other recommendations in here. And these are generalized recommendations for everyone, so everyone can have a safe and healthy Halloween. First and foremost, you have to make a decision as a parent whether or not you choose to participate or not. And it's entirely incumbent upon parents determining what's right for themselves and their children. So if it's not appropriate for you to participate, then don't. So, you know, a couple of the major bullet points, and I won't go through all of them, is people who are sick with flu-like symptoms or COVID-19 should not participate in any way, either in trick or treat or passing out candy. People who have had a test result and are still pending test results should not participate. People under quarantine should not participate. People who are handing out Halloween candy should wear masks and gloves when doing that activity. It should all be prepackaged. It should not be homemade goods. And they should all be individually wrapped items. Parents Also encouraged to clean items and inspect items, as always is the case with every Halloween. Always inspect your children's candy. Do not set out common containers where people can come on and just grab their hands through the basket of candy. Obviously, same as always, if you're going to participate, turn your porch light on, make sure it looks like you're participating. If you choose not to participate, please turn your porch light off. You should probably have hand sanitizer and things like that available if you are participating. Children are encouraged, even though they will have Halloween costumes on, should still wear some kind of either mask or surgical mask underneath their outfit, and do your best trick-or-treat in the family, but stay away from non-family members, at least even outdoors. Try and maintain that 6 foot of distance between other participants, and just avoid attending large indoor, particularly indoor Halloween events and parties, because we know indoor events are a much bigger deal than outdoor events. So maintain your social distance, avoid large gatherings, and those are some fairly common sense things. Obviously, if you have questions, you can call the Conneaut City Health Department, 440-593-3087. These guidelines have also been posted to the city's website. So everybody can jump on our website and pull down those guidelines. The guidelines will be exactly the same no matter what community you're in Ashtabula County. So the health department has issued the same guidelines across the board. So hopefully that clarifies things. And again, we just encourage people to use common sense. Before I go on, are there any questions from council on the trick or treat issue? I will keep moving on. Our Conneaut Creek dredge material facility, our phase 1 plans are fully complete and published at this point. I've submitted them to ODNR and the Ohio EPA for review. They've also been sent to Canadian National for their review and approval. We keep taking incremental steps closer to moving into that phase 1. Other major projects is we have some demolitions that have been hanging out on here, pending demolitions. They were supposed to go off this spring. Obviously, with everything that's been going on here in 2020, they've been significantly delayed. The bids for those demolitions, which is 299 Cleveland, 175 15th, and 397 Madison Street, are due back to the county October 5th. So those are now kind of within sight and will still happen this year, though we hit some delays. A couple other things I want to touch on. Public Works is doing some additional patchwork. Harbor Street is still open. We're grinding out some other areas, and we probably inside the next 2 weeks we'll be back to put final servicing in those patches. I know we've had some questions about the Harbor 20 grinding, so I wanted to add that in there. But we also have a contractor that will be coming in and doing assisting us with some of that patchwork, because there's some large patching that still needs to be done. And then draw your attention to 2 kind of on-deck pieces. We were tentatively awarded an ODNR PEG paddling enhancement grant in the value of $27,000. I attached that in your packet as well. We'll address it in the work session in October. And there is an ODOT consent agreement that we'll deal with in October, which is a sign and replacement project along the Route 7 corridor through Conneaut. So those are kind of some on-deck pieces. Trying to think if there's anything else I jumped over, but that's all I have unless there's any questions about the written portions of the report.
Mr. Hockaday, we had talked about Parks meeting on the 13th at 6 p.m. of October.
And we talked about doing it Zoom. Is that a problem with any of the committee members for the Parks Committee?
I just have one comment on the construction at Harbor and State. For the history buffs out there, you want to get down there and take a look. The old trolley tracks are visible before they repair that and cover them over again. It's a pretty nice thing to see as far as the history of what once went through that area. So. Any other comments or questions for the city manager? If now we'll move on to the finance director, Mr. Williams.
Mr. Arcaro, I have no report this evening.
Okay. Move on to the law director, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President. There's a lot going on actually, but I just want to touch on 2 points. 2 weeks ago, we got a permanent injunction to stop scrapping at 426 Harbor and 186 Ackerman, I believe. And so that has become a permanent injunction, and we can enforce that again anytime that problem develops. We are trying to monitor that as best we can with the limited staff right now in the planning and zoning office. The second thing is that I just want to let you know that Chris Newcomb, my assistant law director, has tendered a resignation effective November 1. Chris has been with me now for 3 years. He's been a very good person in the office. He's got an exemplary record in the court, and we will be sorry to be losing him. We are currently engaged in advertising for additional or for replacement, and when we have one, we'll let you know. That's all.
Okay. Do you happen to have any update on the scrapping operation on West Jackson?
None that I would trust my memory to at this point, but I'll be happy to look into it and shoot you an email.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you. Any other questions or comments for the law director? Okay, now we'll move on to reports of our standing committees. Hearing none, move on to liaison reports.
I have a report tonight, Mr. President.
Mrs. Ledford.
On September 21st, the council met with a joint meeting with the Conneaut School Board. At that meeting, we came up with a verbal okay to go with our paving project for Chestnut. I know we will talk about this more in an ordinance that we have coming up tonight, but it's very good news, and we'll be able to do those enhancements around Lakeshore Primary. Lori Riley gave us an update of how the school opening has been going. So far, it's been going well. They do have contingency plans if there is a COVID outbreak or any kind of incident. So they have all kinds of procedures and in place for that. We announced also the truck road opening. And since the school board was highly involved in that project, they were there to help with the ribbon cutting. We also talked about the SRO, which we as a council will need to discuss maybe at our work session in October. They're still interested in a resource officer and would like to continue to discuss it with council. We had an update on the trailer park where there was some complaints regarding the trailer park on Chestnut Street. So Ms. Bernardini gave us an update on the progress on that. There has been improvements made. So at this point, everything is okay until we see that there's any additional problems. And I think that is it. It was a very good meeting. I thank Mr. Williams for coming in place for Jim, Mr. Hockaday. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. Any other liaison reports?
Yes. On September 23rd, there was a cable advisory board meeting, and we just spoke about some upcoming programming and how the cable advisory board is going to tackle switching to being a possible streaming service. Well, not so much a service, just possibly streaming the channel.
Okay. Any other liaison reports? Terry, can you find out what's up there? Just had somebody walk in. If you guys could stand by.
Very straight.
Wants to address.
Yeah.
Okay. There's no further liaison reports. We'll move on to our ordinances and resolutions for this evening. And we have 7 ordinances in first reading, and we will begin with ordinance 75-5.
A resolution accepting the amounts and rates is determined by the Budget Commission and authorizing the necessary tax levies and certifying them to the county auditor.
Okay, Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Arcaro. In July, we prepared a tax budget which council passed and submitted to the County Budget Commission. At that time, we had a list of estimates based upon our tax valuation of about 186 million. The Tax Budget Commission then reviews our estimates and sends back the rates of resolution, which are to be accepted by council by October 1st of each year. The only difference between our estimate and one of theirs was in the new fire levy. We had $531,206. They came up with an estimate of $529,157, which is a difference of $2,049. It's really a minimal amount. And these are just estimates. The collections will much likely be higher, but we do have a 5% delinquency factor. The inside millage we estimated, just to review, is about 676,000 based upon 3.63 mils. Outside mills of 10.75 with an estimated collection of 1.88 million. We're looking at a total collection of around 2.5 million, a little in excess of that. And the only one of the levies that has a reduction factor is the police levy, which was passed in 2003. The rest are at full millage. And the only levy we have that is a non-continuous levy is the road levy. That will expire in 2022. That is the last year of assessment for collection in 2023. So it's it's not that far away, but it's something to consider in future budgets. So that's basically an overview of the rates of resolution.
Okay. Any questions or comments for Mr. Williams?
I have one. Mr. Williams, the fire levy that was passed in 2019,
Yes.
which we will be able to do our 2 additional hires in 21.
We will be doing that in 2021, in the spring of 2021.
Okay.
That's when we'll receive the first half real estate tax collection in somewhere in March of next year.
Okay, so we'll start realizing that at that time. And
That's
then
correct.
that part of the fire levy was hiring 2, I believe, 2 additional firefighters, or 3?
3.
3, okay.
And Mr. Hockaday, regarding that, has the process began for those positions or?
Not yet. So where we are is civil service was supposed to take place in May of 2020, which obviously that didn't take place. So we've notified the Civil Service Commission that those tests will need to occur this fall. I know the fire chief we will have to likely rent a location. We'll be talking a little bit about this on Wednesday when we talk about our CARES Act appropriation, because we will have to have a space large enough to accommodate all the people that hope to take that test them during the duration of that test. So right now, depending on kind of a late fall issuance of that test, so we can do our hiring at the end of the first quarter of 21. So that's where we're at with it. Typically, we would have had the testing out of the way already, but we do have to do civil service, not only just for the fire department, but almost all of our civil service lists are expired at this point. So we'll be reissuing a number of them. So once that is all finally scheduled and we've secured a location, we'll be rolling that announcement out because obviously we want as many people as possible to take the civil service test for those open positions because we want the best candidates.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments regarding resolution 75-20? Now I'll entertain a motion to proceed.
Mr. Arcaro, I'll make a motion that we waive the 3 reading rule on resolution 75-20.
There's a motion to suspend a 3 reading rule on resolution 75-20. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Mr. Mozia.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Gah,
Yes.
Mr. Kozewski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mrs. McBoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moisia.
Yes.
For Mr. Kozewski, the 3 reading rule has been suspended.
I make a motion we act on resolution 75-20.
The motion to act on resolution 75-20. Is there a second?
I
Second.
second.
Second by Mrs. Ledford.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Gah,
Yes.
Mr. Kozewski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mrs. McBoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moisia.
Yes.
Resolution 75-20 is passed. Move on to ordinance 76-20.
An ordinance to reappoint Patrick Arcaro to the Conneaut Port Authority for a period of 4 years, beginning October 13th, 2020 and ending October 12th, 2024, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Hockaday.
Mr. Patrick Arcaro's term doesn't expire until mid-month in October. Patrick has served on that board very well. I had a conversation with the chairman of the Conneaut Port Authority, Mr. George Peterson, who I believe is still with you up there in council chambers.
Yes.
And I have no reservations about supporting Patrick's request to be reappointed and would encourage council to accept it. I don't know if Mr. Peterson has any further comments or anything that he would like to add to that conversation.
I would just say that I highly recommend Patrick to be very good, very detailed, and keeps us in line.
He concurs and is recommending the appointment. Any other comments or questions regarding ordinance 76-20? Not, is there a motion to proceed?
I'll make a motion, Mr. Arcaro, to declare ordinance 76-20 an emergency.
There's a motion to declare ordinance 76-20 emergency. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Mr. Emery.
Mr. Arcaro,
Abstain?
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Gah,
Yes.
Mr. Kozewski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mrs. McVoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo.
Yes.
Mr. Mosio, the emergency has been declared.
I'd like to make a motion to suspend the 3 reading rule on ordinance 7620.
There's a motion to suspend the 3 reading rule on ordinance 76-20. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Mrs. McVoy.
Mr. Arcaro,
Abstain?
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Gah,
yes,
Mr. Kozewski,
yes,
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mrs. McVoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Mosio, the 3 reading rule has been suspended.
I would like to make a motion to act on ordinance 76-20.
The motion to act on ordinance 76-20. Is there a second?
second,
Second by Mr. Goff.
Mr. Arcaro,
Abstain?
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Gah,
yes,
Mr. Kozewski,
yes,
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mrs. McVoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 76-20 has passed. Move on to resolution 77-20.
A resolution expressing intent to adopt native plant communities in the city of Conneaut.
Mrs. McVoy.
Yes, this resolution was actually presented in conjunction with the Master Gardeners and also the Conneaut Lions Club and the city to adopt a process of trying to encourage us to use 80% of native plants. Native plants encourages the repopulation of native insects and as well as the pollinator process here in our area. I know with Mr. God doing so much work and the city investing in the Malik Park area, would be nice to see if we had any, plants had to be introduced to that park or any other park or public space that we try to adhere to this ordinance or this resolution about native plants.
Okay, any questions or comments? Resolution 77-20. Okay, if not, Mrs. McVoy.
At this time, is this an emergency? No.
No.
At this time, I'd like to make a motion to act on resolution 77-20.
Have to suspend first.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not feeling well tonight. Can I get a motion to suspend the 3 reading rule on resolution 77-20?
So motion to suspend the 3 reading rule on resolution 77-20. Is there a second?
second,
Second by Mr. Mosio.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Gah,
yes,
Mr. Kozewski,
yes,
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mrs. McVoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo.
Yes.
And Mrs. McVoy, the 3 reading rule has been suspended.
At this time, I'd like to make a motion to act on resolution 77-20.
So motion to act on resolution 77-20. Is there a second?
second,
I second.
Seconded by Mr. Goff.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Gah,
yes,
Mr. Kozewski,
yes,
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mrs. McVoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo.
Yes.
Okay, resolution 77-20 is passed. Move on to ordinance number 78-20.
Fiscal Officer Certificate to the Council of the City of Conneaut, Ohio. As Fiscal Officer of the City of Conneaut, Ohio, I certify in connection with your proposed issue of bonds in the maximum principal amount of $420,000 for the purpose of paying the costs of design, engineering, and acquisition of right-of-way easements for a street improvement to Route 20 West and related expenses that 1, the estimated life or period of usefulness of the improvement described above is at least 5 years. 2, the maximum maturity of the bonds calculated in accordance with sections 1 through 3.20 is 15 years, being my estimate of the life or period of usefulness of that improvement. If and to the extent a portion of the proceeds of the bonds may be determined to be allocated to a class or classes having a maximum maturity of less than 15 years, but in excess of 5 years, then the maximum maturity of the bonds would still be at least 15 years by reason of a sufficient portion of the proceeds of the bonds allocated to a class or classes having maximum maturity or an estimated period of usefulness in excess of 15 years. Signed, John Williams, Director of Finance, September 28th. An ordinance providing for the issuance and sale of bonds in a maximum principal amount of $420,000 for the purpose of paying the cost of design, engineering, and acquisition of right-of-way easements for a street improvement to Route 20 West and related expenses and declaring an emergency.
Okay, Mr. Hockaday.
Okay, so very briefly, Council had already previously approved a SIB loan for this portion of this project. We had prepared a final application. Throughout the course of 2020, interest rates have continued to fall. ODOT SIB loans bear an interest rate of 3%. Right now, it is actually more advantageous for us to let this as a private municipal bond than it is to take it through the SIB program. So we have set our SIB loan application aside and are asking council to go this way. John, Mr. Williams, you have a total calculated savings based on the improved interest rate of taking it the method of bond versus state infrastructure bank.
Yeah, it's at least, excuse me, at least $30,000 in savings. If we go with the 10-year, if we went with the 15-year, obviously the savings would be even greater. So, and we're looking at 2.2% tax exempt.
So I know it's a change in course from what we had previously discussed with the SIB loan, but I think it's a superior option to save any interest rate we can.
Okay, any questions or comments on ordinance 78-20? Okay, if not, I'll entertain a motion to proceed.
I motion to declare ordinance 78-20 an emergency.
It's a motion to declare ordinance 78-20 an emergency. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Mr. Mr. Mosey.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
yes,
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mrs. McBoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moisia.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Emery, the emergency has been declared.
I would like to motion to suspend the 3 reading rule on ordinance 78-20.
There's a motion to suspend the 3 reading rule on ordinance 78-20. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Mrs. Ledford.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
yes,
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mrs. McBoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moisia.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Emery, the 3 reading rule has been suspended.
I'd like to make a motion to act on ordinance 78-20.
So motion to act on ordinance 78-20. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Goff.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
yes,
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mrs. McBoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moisia.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 78-20 is passed. Move on to ordinance 79-20.
An ordinance to create Fund 245 COVID-19 grant to account for the receipt and disbursement of funding from the Ashtabula County Health Department for the purpose of allowing the Conneaut Health Department to prevent, prepare for, and respond to COVID-19.
Mr. Williams.
This is a grant that was received by the health department from the county. I believe they're getting a little over $76,000 in grant funding. And we have to create the fund first. We'll certify the revenue. Once that is done, which should be done by next meeting, we can go ahead and appropriate those funds. I believe they can be used for contact tracing, for equipment. I know they're looking at new refrigeration. And it can also be used for salaries that were in excess of what was originally appropriated.
Okay, any questions or comments for the finance director?
I have one. That can also be used for overtime reimbursement?
Yes. Yes, I can.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments on ordinance 79-20? Now I'll entertain a motion to proceed.
Mr. Arcaro, I'll make a motion to waive the 3 reading rule on ordinance 79-20.
There's a motion to suspend the 3 reading rule on ordinance 79-20. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Goff.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Gah,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
yes,
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes,
Mrs. McBoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo.
Yes.
And Mr. Mosio, the 3 reading rule has been suspended.
I'd like to make a motion to act on ordinance 79-20.
So motion to act on ordinance 79-20. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Goff.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Gah,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
yes,
Mrs. Ledford,
yes,
Mrs. McBoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 79-20 is passed. Move on to ordinance 80-20.
An ordinance to amend the 2020 budget through appropriations and fund and interfund transfers attached here to and marked Exhibit A.
Okay, Mr. Williams.
Okay, this ordinance is related to the next ordinance, 8120. I'm sure Mr. Hockaday will talk about this a little bit more as far as the ordinance 8120 is concerned. But we're looking at a change order for Chestnut and Middle Road project of about $257,000. We had $409,000 appropriated. We have another $151,000 in unencumbered funds available to appropriate. We're going to need an additional $110,000 in appropriations to cover that change order. This will accomplish that, so the Chestnut Street project can be completed.
Okay, Mr. Hockaday, would you like to address this now or wait for the next one?
If there are any questions, you can act on this, and then you don't have to come back to me on the next one. So essentially, when we set up Chestnut and Middle Road paving project, we included resurfacing the area in front of the elementary school. Upon more extensive review with the school district, when we were setting up this project, the school district requested a lane configuration change, which was not accounted for in the original project. So what we did is we went back and we accommodated the traffic pattern change that the school district requested. And bear in mind that I totally agree with what they're requesting as well. I think it will make for a significantly safer and cleaner operation for pickup and drop off operations at the start and stop of school. So we had to go back and do some redesign to add that third turning lane in the center. We paused that portion of the project. So our original total estimated cost for the OPWC application was $549,000. Our bids were incredibly favorable, and we came in at $409,000. Actual performed work was lower than that. It was $379,000. So we do have some additional grant funds that are left unleveraged. So once we rebid this change order portion, it came in at $257,000. So we would now be able to utilize those additional OPWC funds that haven't been used up. So we're still getting a good value out of it. We will need to appropriate, as Mr. Williams suggested, an additional $110,000. And this, the school district has also agreed to contribute $50,000. Part of that is predicated on the fact that the sidewalks on the school side are actually at grade. There are no curbs or sidewalks on their side. So those will all need removed. There will be a full curb. There will also be a sidewalk placed in there, and the concrete aprons will also need to be widened out to match. So the school district's going to cover that portion of the cost of the project, which is appreciated. And we again have an incredibly collaborative relationship with the school board. We do have the funds available within our road levy program. And we do have some additional OPWC funds that I'd rather not return. I'd rather make this improvement Obviously, not all of the improvements in this are OPWC eligible, but everything that we can, we should use those dollars to finish this project. We have told Koski that this is a probable change order. They are working on a maintenance traffic plan. Obviously, we're in school right now. So once we receive that here in the next week or two, we'll get it approved through the city. We'll also ask for the school district's approval, and they will begin work on this project immediately. So we'll still get it off yet this fall in terms of completing the project. So if there are any questions on the part of council, this was discussed at the joint session, which Ms. Ledford referred to earlier. So I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody on council would have.
So, Mr. Hockaday, the $60,000 that is going to come from the street improvement program, Fund 311?
No, so there's 110 from the city additional, 50 from the school district. And John, do you want to address the change between the original appropriation versus what we need to appropriate additional?
Yeah, originally it was 282,000 for the OPWC and 282 for the city, which was the 564. That was the original amount that we had appropriated. But as the project changed and that 257,000 change order was submitted, we had to increase the street levy portion by 110,000.
So that's what's coming out of this.
Out of the street levy.
110,000.
110,000 additional, right?
Out of the street improvement program.
Right.
Okay.
And that funding is available through that levy, correct, Mr. Williams?
It is. Yes, we have a significant, pretty significant fund balance in there right now.
And these two streets are because of the extensive work that was done to both of them, and Mr. Hockaday. So there's no plans for any additional streets this cycle, correct?
No, we were waiting on what the total cost was going to be this year. What we're looking at for that additional fund balance is, one, I wouldn't mind having a little bit of carryover. There's approximately $10 million worth of work going on next year. That if there's any kind of overage or responsibility that'll fall to the city, that we have some fund balance. But in addition to that, we have some patching yet that we're working on right now that will take a bite out of that present fund balance. But we are also looking at having to take the grindings that we have been stockpiling in the industrial park and applying them even yet this year. So I may be coming back to council at some point in the near future for that if we can get final pricing on it. But either way, we will likely have to relocate that or distribute those. And that can be a conversation during a work session or something like that. But the reason why there's balance is because we've received grants and we're matching up our public improvements in that street levy one-to-one with grants. So it makes our dollars go further. That's not typically the case.
But when we do this, we will be using a significant portion of that fund balance. It's 305,000 right now. We'll appropriate an additional 151 plus the 110. So we'll still have a carryover in the fund, but it's not going to be nearly as much as 305,000.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on either ordinance 80-20 or 81-20?
I actually have just a question generally about the contract that we enter into with Koski in regards to having work done on the school property. Is that a contract entered in between the city and Koski, or is the school part of that at all? Just wondering in case something were to happen, maybe something isn't put in wrong, and then the schools come back to the city, or how does that exactly work?
The majority of it is done within the public right of way. So all the sidewalk work and so on and so forth. There may be a portion of the apron that would extend into their driveway apron. You know, and that could either be done by temporary easement. I mean, any of their work is going to be warranted, the same as any of our work by its contractual language. I don't know if any of it is going to happen on their private property. I will have to look at the drawings again, but I don't know that it does extend onto their private property. It extends outside the roadbed area that we presently serve, if that makes any kind of sense. But the biggest issue in pricing some of this is their asphalt and that kind of stuff. We do everything on a unit price basis in all our bids. So those prices are easy to extend. In this case, the stormwater basins, whenever they widened the road before, did not move. So the stormwater basins are actually in the center of the road. They're not at the curb line. And the sidewalks are at grade. They're not actually curbed and raised. So all of that will need to be removed and extended. And the stormwater catch basins will be pushed to the curb like you would see in any typical municipal road plan. So that's a lot of the change. That had to be redesigned, had to be quoted, and sent back out because we did not price that in the initial piece. So that had to be taken to them for them to offer individual quote. And that's part of the reason why it took a little bit longer to do some of this. But I will confirm that to you. But if there is something that's done on private property, we'll make sure that the school has consent and copies of insurance. Koski is a very large, reputable contractor within the county. So that shouldn't be an issue.
Okay, very good.
Any other questions or comments regarding these ordinances? If not, I'll entertain a motion to proceed on ordinance 80-20.
I'll make a motion to suspend the 3 reading rule on ordinance 80-20.
Motion to suspend the 3 reading rule on ordinance 80-20. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Mosio.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Gah,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mrs. McVoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo.
Yes.
And Mrs. Ledford, the 3 reading rule has been suspended.
This time I'd like to act on ordinance 80-20.
Motion to act on ordinance 80-20. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Gah.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Gah,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mrs. McVoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 80-20 is passed. Move on to ordinance 81-20.
An ordinance authorizing an additional cost of $250,330 for the Chestnut Street from Lake Road to 16th Street and Middle Road from Route 20 to the I-90 Bridge resurfacing project and declaring it an emergency.
Okay, is there a motion to proceed?
Mr. Arcaro,
Oh, go ahead.
to waive or to declare ordinance 81-20 to emergency.
There's a motion to declare ordinance 81-20 an emergency. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Mrs. McCoy.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Gah,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mrs. McVoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Mosio, the emergency has been declared.
Like make a motion to suspend the 3 reading rule on 81-20.
So motion to suspend the 3 reading rule on ordinance 81-20. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Mr. Emery.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Gah,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mrs. McVoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Mosio, the three reading rule has been suspended.
I'd like to make a motion to act on ordinance 81-20.
The motion to act on ordinance 81-20, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Guy.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Gah,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
yes,
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes,
Mrs. Moiseo, Mrs. McVoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo.
Yes.
My apologies. Got ahead of myself.
I almost said yes.
Ordinance 81-20 has passed. And move on to unfinished and old business. Okay, hearing none. We have a late arriving citizen that would like to comment. So I'm hoping you guys are going to be able to hear this. So good evening to our guests. We'd like to address City Council. Community participation is an important part of local government is encouraged. Please be advised that City Council sessions are audio and video recorded. Please step up to the table there and state your name and address for the record. Please keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. No abusive or threatening language is allowed. If you have specific questions, you will receive a follow-up answer from either council or the city manager. There will be no public debate at this time. When you're finished, you're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting or you can leave.
Thank you. Scary Spring, I'm at 520 Broad. Been there for over 30 years. I woke up one morning and found a bikers painted on the side of my road. And a sign saying I no longer am able to use front yard to parking for half the year. And another sign saying I'm allowed to share the road with the bikers, but the net result is 6 months out of the year, they take the road from me. So that was a surprise. Nobody contacted me or I think any of the hundreds of people on Broad Street to see what we thought has been the case for decades. So hundreds of people have been displaced for the maybe 10 bikers that travel down Broad Street each week, with the exception of the MS 150, which we have thousands of them. None have ever been put on Broad Street. So my concern, couple-fold. One, the bike lane is on the east side of the street. So I presume they're going with traffic heading north. I'm not sure what the anticipation is for them going south, because that would be a bit of a hazard if they're going against traffic. My understanding is the 6 different ways that pretty much bikers are typically injured. The bike lane is going to not only not reduce any of those, but it's going to quite frankly increase the chance of injury to any bikers going down Broad Street on the bike lane because of the way bikers are hurt and killed to the tune of whatever. 857 were killed in 2018 by the statistics. So my suggestion, if nothing else, is, well, you just remove both signs. If nothing else, especially the sign that says no parking between April 1st and November 1st, keeping the sign up to share the road is fine, making people more aware of it, but not having to feel the need to add some kind of penalty for people that have parked on the road. Because as I said, and you can look at, I don't know if there are any studies done by the council or anybody else seeing how many bikers go down there, or if it would increase or reduce the safety of the bikers. As I said, you can pretty much take a quick Google of a bunch of things and see that it'll probably increase the hazards to the bikers because of the increased traffic of bikers that this is probably intended to get, as well as it's a busy road. It should be on the road, and it's the only road, to my knowledge, that Conneaut is going to or has defined as the flight lane. And so there's, again, no way for them to get back from the lake. So it's just really, it doesn't make sense. That's my main thought. So I would suggest we at least get rid of any kind of penalty for the parking. It's not going to increase the hazard for people parking there. The concept I suggest is moving to a less busy road. And ask the people that are going to be affected by it, just as a common courtesy for those who have lived here for decades and pay taxes and all of that. Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. We'll move on to miscellaneous business. Does anybody have any miscellaneous business?
Yeah, I just want to congratulate Alicia Zappatella. On the 17th of September, she won the Invicta Atomweight title. And she's on a 3-fight win streak currently. And she had a welcome home recently over the weekend. And I just wanted to extend congratulations to her. And I hope that we can kind of do something for her in the future with council. So
Very good. Anybody else have any miscellaneous business?
I just want to add on to Mr. Emery's remarks. I was there at the welcome home and congratulated her from the city, but I think I do agree with Mr. Emery. She is a world champion and she's doing fabulous representing our community, not only nationally, but worldwide. So I think some form of recognition would be nice for her.
Anybody else for miscellaneous business?
At our next work session, can we bring up about the crossings being blocked by Norfolk Southern? I guess we had a bad go of it over the weekend for a total of probably about 3-4 hours. We need to step up the fines and try to get with the company and us, and I think we can work this out. That's it. Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Goff, if you could remind the clerk to put that on the agenda when it gets closer to the work session.
Okay, that I will.
Okay. And Mr. Emery, would you like to sponsor a proclamation for Ms. Zappatella?
absolutely.
Okay, very good. Any other miscellaneous business? Okay, if not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion.
Oh, I'll make a
Make a
motion.
motion.
to adjourn.
Okay, second by Mrs. McBoy.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Gah,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Lightford,
Yes.
Mrs. McBoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moisia.
Yes.
Okay, City Council for September 28th is adjourned. Thank you all.